Hey, it's Marella Manelli, and today I'm going to show you how I created this dimensional color correction complete with some natural face framing highlights and finished it off with a beautiful copper finish using all Kenra color. Now let's go ahead and get started. My model needed a little bit of color correction, and the reason why I'm considering this a color correction is because she has previous box dye on her hair. And then about a year ago, she did some highlights that we need to help diffuse some of that line of demarcation. So we got a lot going on here. You can see she had a partial weave done, and we need to diffuse that line of demarcation from those old highlights. And she's looking for an overall richened effect, as well as something that's low maintenance. So what I'm gonna do first is pre-section her for a natural face framing money piece, and then we're gonna use some techniques of low lights as well as some teasy lights and a little bit of hair painting to bring this look all together. For her low light formula, I'm using 1.5 ounces of 7 MB plus from the Monochrome Collection, and then 1/2 ounce of 4B plus, and I'm mixing that up 1:1 with 10 volume developer because I'm looking for deposit only, and this is really going to help break up those old highlights. And the reason why I chose the Monochrome Collection is because it's going to give me a saturated finish, which is amazing from this collection. And then for her teasy lights and face frame, I'm going in with blue powder lightener at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 20 volume developer. So first I'm going to get started on her face frame, and I'm just pulling this entire section up and weaving the hair towards me and just really focusing on getting those little baby hairs. So I decided to split this up into 2 foils because it was rather a wide section. So just for some added control, I decided to just split this up into 2, and this is going to give you the perfect customization according to your client's hairline. So sometimes you will only use 1 foil, and sometimes you might use 2 or even 3 foils. So I like to also section this way because it just gives me a nice clean sectioning and a close effect, so that I'm not worried about bleeding or anything like that, especially around that hairline. So once I get those 2 first foils, and I'm now going to go in with another foil, but right back to back, so there's not going to be any hair in between these foils. So I just weave that section right on out and place the foil right behind that one. And I'm taking my lightener all the way to the root on each of these sections. So I usually take my brush a little sideways and move that lightener slightly up, and this is how I am able to get really close to the root without it bleeding on to the hair in between the foils. So that's just an added tip for myself and something that I've learned along the way. Now, because she wants a pretty natural face frame, I'm only going to go in with about 3, maybe 4 back-to-back baby lights here. So the bolder you want your money piece or that face frame, the more back-to-back foils that you are going to put in. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you want something to start to transition, that's where you're going to incorporate hair in between those foils. But as you can see, I only have those 3 back-to-backs, and this is where I'm going to start incorporating hair to create that transition. So I just weave that 1/4 inch section out and then further tease it, and what this is going to do is give me a rooted effect. So this is how I create that transition from something bold and then into something softer. And that triangular section on the top is also further going to diffuse that line of demarcation and the line of where those highlights begin and end. And that's why I love doing triangular sections for money pieces and all types of face frames, is specific to that transition. For me, I love seeing the boldness start out on the hairline and then gradually blending it right into the rest of the hair, which really makes it low maintenance and something totally wearable for everybody. So in total, I'm only adding in 3 teasy lights and also 3 back-to-back baby lights for that front hairline with a total of technically 6 foils, but 7 because I added the extra one in the very front hairline there. Now, once I get these natural face frames right here on the top, I'm only gonna add in 1 highlight to each side. Now, I decided to put in 1 teasy light right behind that hairline, and this was just to help break up that line of demarcation that she has going on from those old highlights. This was not to add any blonding or further brightness around the sides. This was simply to help diffuse a line, and I want to maintain her overall brunette look. So once I get in these highlights on each side, I then section for her low lights throughout the back. So I decided to go in with a slight V right onto the occipital and bringing that section all the way forward towards the ear. I then take a small 1/4 inch slice and then weave a regular weave right on top of that. Now this is going to be her low light formula where I start to introduce it, and I'm actually using a color board with my foil, and the reason why I decided to do this is because she has pretty thick hair and the color board does help me push the product through to the other side. It just gives me a nice foundation to stand on when doing a color application. So I'm going to put in 2 foils on each side of this section. And now I decided to do a traditional highlight for this because I really wanted to help show off those ribbons of color of that monochrome that we're adding in. So this is the 7MB plus, so a rich mocha brown, and the 4B is just gonna further deepen my shade. And what I'm loving about this collection is it gives me a nice saturated finish, which you'll see those tones softly poke through at the very end. So as I start to work through this sectioning, I am basically bricklayering this entire low light. So I start off with the V section and then I finish it off with 1 horizontal. This just gives me lots of movement going on with the color, which I absolutely love because I never want someone to look at my color job and know where exactly I place those foils. I want it to be really dimensional and have lots of movement, and this is how I create that. So I'm going to continue on with this pattern, taking my diagonals with the V-shaped sections that I created, and I'm also going to go in with those horizontals. So continuing on with this sectioning until I get to the very, very top of her head. As I get towards the top though, something to consider is that's typically where the hair is most visible, so my subsections become quite smaller than what I started out with. Here at towards the bottom, my subsections are pretty wide, about 1.5 inches thick, but they do start to get to about 1/2 inch thick once I get towards that top section. To complete my lowlights, I'm using horizontal placement until I get to the very front where I added those face framing highlights. So each of these subsections are approximately 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch wide, so it's really all relative to how much blending I'm trying to create here. So she does have quite a bit of back-to-back highlights, especially here on the top, which is exactly why I'm taking smaller subsections. For an added pop of blonde for those face framing highlights, I am tipping out the hairs that were left out in between those foils. And then to further break up the old blonde as well as lift some of that old box dye out, I'm using my remaining lightener to freehand hair paint just randomly selected pieces of hair. So I just wanted to break it up, add little pops of blonde here and there, but still keeping it low maintenance. For her final formula, I'm going to use Demi Permanent 6N at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 9 volume developer. And then for my secondary formula, I'm using 7 CG at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 9 volume developer. I'm starting out by applying my 6N formula, which is my darker formula, right onto the new growth. Now she does have a little bit of grays going on, and I'm not quite sure if you can see them through the camera, but I decided to use 6N for a gray blend, and I'm using my 0 time system brush to quickly get this on. I was able to get her root melt on in about 5 minutes, and then when I get towards the front, I'm actually gonna be using a different brush. But first I'm focusing here on the back section, and then I'm gonna take my Fermar brush that actually has a comb on the back side and just comb that color right on through. So what this does is it helps diffuse that line of demarcation of any previous blonde that we had left over that I didn't quite grab from those lowlights. So right here in the front, I'm then taking the 6N and just tapping it right onto the root area, right where those face framing highlights are at, and then also combing those through. Next, I take my 7CG formula and apply it from the mids and ends and help blend it in right onto those face frame highlights. Before the back, I decided to add a ribbon of 7cc in Demi Permanent and just mix that right into my 7CG formula that I already had existing in the bowl. And this is just gonna give me an extra pop of copper throughout the back, especially since the blonde isn't as bright anymore. And then I'm just gonna process her for 20 minutes room temperature and get ready for her final style. And here's the final result of my color correction, complete with some natural face framing highlights with a copper finish. Just to give you a little recap, I went in with her low light formula using the Monochrome Collection in Kenra color, 7MB with a little bit of 4B at a 1:1 mixing ratio with 10 volume developer. And then for that natural face framing highlight, I used blue powder lightener at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 20 volume developer. And then for her final toner, I went in with Demi Permanent of 6N and blended that right into 7CG for that natural face framing highlight in the front. And then for the back, I just added a few ribbons of 7cc for that extra pop of copper. So I really hoped you enjoyed this hair tutorial, and if you did, please give this video a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe, and be sure to check out my other hair tutorials right here on this channel, and I will see you next time.